Hello and welcome. Today we're going to discuss the value of participating in the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase with an interactive panel of veterans of our showcase and previous demonstrations. So I want to get right into it and get started by welcoming a few of our panelists here. Michael Nussbaum to start with MH Nussbaum and Associates. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello everybody, and I'd like to join with Philip in welcoming you all. So I'm a longtime veteran of the Interoperability Showcase. In fact, my story began in 2007, which was actually year 4 of the showcase. And I wandered in completely by randomly, and I was really intrigued by this notion of interoperability and demonstration of interoperability. And a lady by the name of Joyce Sensmeyer, who I know you all know, came up to me and said, "I'll show you around." And I spent probably 4 hours with Joyce that day. She showed me all the demonstrations that were being shown, which is, kind of the rudimentary version of what we have now. And then she showed me behind the curtain. It was kind of like the Wizard of Oz, and showed me what was going on in the background with the vendors that were participating. It was really quite interesting. But at the end of it, I was so excited about it that that I said, I really would like to get involved. So she encouraged me to join IHE, which led me to become a committee chair and eventually a board member of IHE International. And I got involved with HIMSS, and I eventually became a board member of HIMSS North America. And I became a long time volunteer for the showcase. And in the early years, for about 7 years, I was actually part of the volunteer leadership. Back in those days, the volunteers did a lot of what the staff do now. So my job at that time was to run what they call the front of the house. And I did that for a long time. And people got to know me because I used to give what was called a Barker speech in the theater. And that was designed to introduce the showcase to an audience of about 50 people that would come. And we do that every 15 minutes for 5 days. So I was very hoarse in the voice, et cetera, et cetera. It's been just a pleasure to see how the showcase has grown, is professionally run, and has significantly evolved in scope and size today, with over 100 participating organizations and 130 demonstrating systems and initiatives. And it just amazes me that 1 in 4 of all conference attendees hit the showcase. It is the largest event on the exhibit floor. In 2019, they had 11,000 visitors. That's staggering. The providers make up a good proportion of that. About 30% of all the people that visit. Senior leadership is well represented with about 25%, IT about 25%. So it really is attracting the right people to understand interoperability, and does it in such a great way. You'll hear lots more about it later. My comments on this panel represent my perspective as a guy who's been an interoperability champion for pretty much my entire career, and how I've been able to volunteer and support the showcase over the years. So by the way, I live in Canada. I live in Victoria, British Columbia. I've been a consultant in digital health since the 80s, and have done a million things, but we won't get involved in that. I'm just really happy to be part of this panel. Thanks so much, Phil.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. I want to turn it over to Lisa Nelson, VP of Marketing and Business with MaxMD. Lisa.
Thanks, Phil. I was just talking before we turned the cameras on to Mike about all the different roles that I have done at the showcase over the years. And so my comments are kind of positioned for some of you who might be listening and just thinking, what would it mean to me? So in the early years, I first got involved as a vendor. I worked for a company called Heart Lab, and we had a cardiac PACS system. And so we were out there interacting with other vendors and pulling a scenario together, and really learned the value of what it was to test your connectivity live and under the pressure of a showcase environment like that. For product management, it was great for us to really understand and have the opportunity to connect in that way. Later, I became a docent and a greeter, just working on the showcase floor, walking around, either telling and educating about the scenarios, which causes you to be even more familiar with the specifications than you were before, understanding how the pieces fit together, and just having the opportunity to see that flow of people that Mike was talking about that come through the showcase, get to meet a lot of different folks, and really understand the gaps of awareness about the power that's being developed in the standards that we have. I later, as a, I guess I was called a co-chair of the HIMSS Health Story Project, I got to participate in the show floor as a speaker, talking about initiatives that you're a part of and helping to spread the knowledge. Also, with the HL7 Gravity Project, the showcase is a great place if you are involved with a special project like that and you just want to get the word out to a lot of people. It was an amazing forum for interest that way. And then finally, at the tail end, you know, one of the things I used to say every year, where are the use cases that show the consumer? Where are the use cases that have the patient's point of view? And every year I would ask and ask and ask. And finally, not last year, but the year before that, I brought a delegation to the showcase. And it was a great experience to get a big group of people. It didn't turn out to be as large as I had hoped or envisioned that it might have been, but they were activated consumers who wanted to come to the interoperability showcase and see what was going on and bring the patient point of view. And although my number of red beret delegates was smaller than I had hoped, it included some really powerful people like e-patient Dave and Virginia Lorenza. And I met Debbie Willis and Abigail. And next thing you know, within months after that, the upswell of that kind of birds of a feather gelling together created a whole new work group at HL7 called Patient Empowerment. And now that group of patients that really didn't have much of a voice is out writing a fire IG and maybe developing standards that will come to the showcase and be demonstrated in subsequent years. So a whole cycle all the way around, that my company might be back as a vendor. You'll see me on the floor as a vendor demonstrating how patients can request to have their medical records corrected when the information isn't correct. So maybe we'll finally have a patient-oriented use case after all. But whatever your interest as a vendor or as a participant or as someone who wants to contact and interact with 1 in 4 people who do come to the HIMSS event, the showcase is a great place to make all those kinds of connections.
Lisa, thank you so much. It's fun to hear you and Michael talk about the barking and the greeting. It really is a full experience when you attend the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase. I now want to talk to Alan Swenson, Vice President of Interoperability with Know2. Alan?
Great, thanks, Phil. As Phil said, I'm the VP of Interoperability at Know2. So I, unlike Mike and Lisa, I am strictly on the vendor side, have been involved in the Interop Showcase for a number of years, both at Know2 and even prior. Previous to Know2 was with one of the large EHR vendors, participating in the Interop Showcase the last, I guess, 3 HIMSS, I guess not counting last year. We did some recordings even for last year, though. If you were on the session right before this, 360X is one of the Interop Showcase demonstrations that we've been involved in, and looking forward to continuing that in the future. You know, last year, obviously things were crazy, but we were still able to do some Interop Showcase recorded demonstrations and other webinars and things throughout a lot of the calendar year, actually last year, leveraging some of that content from the Interop Showcase. Prior years to that, we even, I guess 18 and 19 HIMSS here at Know2, we tried out some of the new offerings with the marketplace kiosks in the Interop Showcase, doing some individual demonstrations with those kiosks, as well as participating in some of the larger use case vignette demonstrations. So definitely, you know, a great experience being able to be there at the showcase, being able to test out and show these different forms of interoperable exchange, working with other EHR vendors to show that, you know, this is something that's real. It's not just, you know, an implementation guide that you can read through and try to understand. Some are definitely better than others, but you know, it's something that's actually real and you can see it, and that's one of the exciting things about participating. We largely work. So at Know2, we offer interoperability as a service. So we are not an EHR vendor ourselves, but we provide interoperability functionality to a number of EHR vendors, particularly across those vendors who aren't in, the acute and ambulatory space and got meaningful use money in the past. So we're working a lot with long-term care, skilled nursing, post-acute, therapies, emergency medical services, vision, dental, and being able to bring those types of groups into the showcase to participate, leveraging APIs that we then do translation to all of the various industry standards. We also make some of this even available to providers who don't have an EHR. In last year's 360X demonstration, and again, like I said, continuing moving forward, part of our role at Know2 in that demonstration is showing a recipient of 360X referral messages using the Know2 web portal because they don't have an EHR system, but they're still able to participate in the healthcare ecosystem and exchange of information and get that information back and forth. So definitely a great experience participating with all the other vendors, and looking forward to more in the future.
Great, thank you, Alan, and thanks for mentioning the Marketplace Kiosk. As the showcase has developed over the years, I think I've been involved since about 2007 with the showcase. It's definitely changed faces over the years, and we've definitely made an opportunity to involve different aspects of the show floor, such as Marketplace Kiosks, for people who may not be ready to jump into our real-time connected demonstrations. We also have special areas such as the ONC. And so I'd like to take a chance to introduce Brett Andreessen with the ONC to talk a little bit about that.
Hey everyone, Brett Andreessen. I am the Infrastructure Branch Chief in ONC's Standards Division. I've been at ONC for just about 10 years now, and you can see from the difference in my headshot and the view today, we've been working hard. Anyhow, ONC, as Phil mentioned, has participated for a number of years in the Interoperability Showcase, kind of piloting and working through connectivity with a number of different profiles and a number of different standards. My work primarily has been kind of in the background, working with the 360X group. If you were on the last panel discussion, we were talking a little bit about that work. 2019 was actually the first time that I got to see the showcase in person, just based on attendees that ONC picks to attend each year. And it was just really awesome, I think, to see a lot of the work, especially in my past leading the Interoperability Standards Advisory, seeing kind of the information and the standards that we had there kind of demonstrated in the real world, or as close as you can get kind of at a conference. So seeing that connectivity was just really amazing. I know others have talked about, how great it is to kind of get the word out about products and standards and kind of get more folks involved. But yeah, it's something that we continue to enjoy, to support, and being able to see that and bring that to life, I think is really one of the best parts of the Interop Showcase.
Brett, thank you. And so we're going to get right into it, some questions that I've come up with that I'm curious about, and see how our panelists answer them. But I also encourage anyone that's in our chat to go ahead and post questions to the chat. We'll be scanning them and definitely bring those to our panelists as well. So please feel free to enter in any questions you have. So let's get it kicked off. Michael, this first one's for you. So the Interoperability Showcase is a collection of healthcare IT vendors working together to show how we can improve the quality of care through standards-based exchanges. How important is collaboration at the showcase?
Well, it's everything. Thanks, Phil. And just by the way, I didn't realize you started in 2007. I remember you, and you were a very, very young student working at the showcase. So there you go. Here we are both.
Yeah, like Brett, I probably had a different headshot.
We all did. Okay, well, first of all, the showcase is really, really a unique venue. It's a unique event, and let's just back up a little bit to 50,000 feet. This vendor community that offers products and services in digital health compete vigorously in the marketplace, but they are all required to have interoperability built in. The users expect it, and so in order to have interoperability, they can't compete. They have to collaborate. So the whole focus of the showcase is to demonstrate that collaboration. Most of them have been to a Connect-a-thon and have tested with their competitors, and that's the first phase. But to be able to be up there and demonstrate that aspect of what their products can do, the interoperability piece, is a very, very powerful message for the user. So the user expects interoperability to be built in, but there's very limited opportunities for the vendors to demonstrate that. The showcase is a way to demonstrate how vendors can actually work together in a real healthcare environment for the benefit of each other and for their clients. And I think it's a really important story. They do it through the lens of a vignette, through a real healthcare story, which allows the users to really understand it, and it allows them to resonate to resonate with them. It's one thing to have information go into one system and pop out another system, but if there's no context around that, it has very little meaning for the attendee at the conference. With the vignettes overlay, it basically allows it so somebody can actually follow a real type event. And of course, after the showcase, our wishes, our expectations are that the vendors actually put these into the production systems and that people can go out and buy them. So that's really the end goal here.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And you know, for those who don't know, the months leading up to the showcase, vendors are working together on weekly meetings to make sure they can put on these demonstrations. So it's not just the week of the conference itself. There is a lot of things going on in the background to make sure that those demonstrations really do tell that healthcare story. Anyone else have any comments about it?
You know, Phil, I was actually just going to say on the other side of that is it's only a few months. Sometimes it's sort of weeks even that those vignettes go from establishing the story and putting together a scenario that can be enacted, and the number of weeks that it actually takes to do the technical connectivity and for the guys to show up, connect their systems together and have the data flowing. I kind of have the other perspective on it is it's incredibly fast that these groups can do end-to-end demonstration of the information flow. And I think that's to the credit of the standards that are involved, that you can bring all these different systems, sometimes 10 or 11 different vendors in one vignette are all operating together because standards make that possible and relatively fast.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And I would like to point out, she makes a great point. I remember when I did get first started, we would create these demonstrations at the IHE Connectathon that's happening right now, and the showcase was always about 2 to 3 weeks right after the Connectathon. And so we managed to put all these things together super quickly. Now we've definitely extended that planning period so that we really have an awesome product to put forward.
Phil, let me just pick up
yeah.
on Lisa's comment on standards, which I think is really critical to this. You know, the holy grail of interoperability is to be able to plug two systems together and have it work. We call it plug compatibility. And of course, that is impossible to be done without standards. So I think the industry is focused on interoperability and as a result, focused on the implementation of standards. So the onus is on us and the standards development side to make sure that we have really robust standards which are easily implementable. And that's a really critical point. We could never have a showcase without those standards behind it. Impossible.
Which actually brings us to our next question. I was going to direct at Lisa. And what do you think is the greatest value behind these interoperability standards?
Thanks, Phil. I teed myself right up there. So I think when you think about interoperability standards, to me, it is the potential to do things in a common way. It doesn't mean that you will do things in a common way, but the base standards like FHIR and CDA and even V2, they create the potential to do things in a common way. They give us a framework for having a language and an approach to solving business problems like the scenarios that the vignettes represent. And then it gives us the possibility for multiple vendors to come together and innovate faster, be more creative, and end up with all of that expressed in a common language and with a common approach. And that is what allows the plug and play that Mike was just talking about to really become a possibility. Because one vendor can get ready on their own based on the standard and the role that their system is playing. Another vendor can get ready on their own based on the role that they're playing. And theoretically, when interoperability standards are working, we can come together and very quickly plug in and share that information. We know what to expect in terms of the syntax, the structure, the semantic coding, and the purpose that the information is intended to drive. So I think that that interoperability standards are really about creating the power for multiple organizations to work together. You don't have to solve all the what we're the whole sort of quadruple aim. It's not possible for one organization to accomplish that mission on its own. We all need to be able to pull together. And the thing that allows us to really have our efforts go in a common direction and contribute to a common cause in the ecosystem is interoperability standards.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Anyone else want to comment on that?
I'll just chime in. Obviously, completely agree. We certainly reference interoperability standards and are pushing towards that every day at ONC. And from our perspective, I think part of what's really nice, and others have alluded to this, is seeing kind of these different companies that are often competitors coming together, working together with the standards kind of at the center to show interoperability off and push towards that. Certainly, except in some cases where we require it, they're not required to do that. They're not required to be there. But I think it shows, the value of those standards and the value that, they can still, businesses can still kind of, be there for themselves and also be, pushing towards interoperability for the sake of patient care and for improving quality of care.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'd like to just introduce something that's fairly recent, and that is the high degree of collaboration amongst standards development organizations. We're seeing collaboration now like never before. And I'll use a fairly new set of standards around the International Patient Summary to illustrate that. We have 5 international standards development organizations in digital health, all collaborating together and building an ecosystem containing artifacts that will work together and help the users implement, help the vendors implement, and allow the users to implement. So, the old days of competing standards are thankfully moving away, and now we're starting to see a tremendous amount of collaboration amongst all of the SDOs that work in this area. I used to be the chair last year of something called the Joint Initiative Council, which is a group of 9 international health SDOs that come together and look for opportunities to collaborate and coordinate amongst themselves. This is a tremendous advancement in terms of where standards are going, and I really encourage that to continue on. And kudos to the ONC and other government organizations that have basically produced standards advisories and guidance that helps the user understand what this ecosystem looks like. And I think the users are getting increasing confidence that what they see in these advisories are the product of lots more collaboration in terms of standards development.
Thanks for saying that, Mike, because actually that also tees off our next question that I have for Alan, and that is, how does the Interoperability Showcase attendees get educated about healthcare standards? As we've pointed out, there's clearly a lot of different things going on. So how does the showcase help them navigate through that?
Yeah, and I think, this kind of goes back to some of the comments others have made already, but that there are, a couple of different types of attendees. I mean, there are vendors who are there as attendees, and then there are customers of those vendors who are there as attendees, and there are probably even other, other types than that. But the great thing about the showcase, there are all of these different standards. And if you're just a vendor and you're saying, hey, I need to accomplish this thing, you can't necessarily just say, well, I'm just going to, pick a standard and develop it and hope someone else also supports it. Because in order for interoperability to work, it's got to be supported on both sides. Now, there are, initiatives from ONC and things like that kind of make it easier to see these are the standards that are most commonly used if you're a vendor. But one of the great things about the Interop Showcase is these are actual real use cases that you can come in and you can participate. And if you're going to participate in, this vignette, this is one that for, my customers, this is one that makes sense. These are the standards that are used. And by developing to those standards, going to the Connect-a-thon, testing those standards, going to the Interop Showcase and doing this demonstration of these standards, I now know that the work that I've done in my system works with all of the other vendors that participated, both in Connect-a-thon and in the Interop Showcase. And for attendees who aren't necessarily participating in the showcase, but are coming and attending, if you're a vendor, you can see that's a use case that matters to me and to my customers. What are the standards that are being used, and what are the vendors who are showing support for it? So I can go develop it, and I already know that I'm going to have some others that I can start working with. And if you're a customer of one of those vendors, your clinical user or clinical organization, you can come and see, hey, that scenario that's being demoed is something that I need, so I'm going to go talk to my vendor about it. And here's the list of standards that were used in the demo that I can tell them, hey, you guys need to support these standards for me to be able to do this cool clinical scenario. One of the other things that comes out of it as a participant, and could be the case for attendees as well, is again just knowing who's doing it and who's participating. Well, we've had work come with like pilots for some of this functionality, for actual piloting around the country of 360X, for example, which I mentioned before. Because we do all of this work with all of these other participating vendors, and we know that this is something my customers need, this is something your customers need. We've done all of this development to show that it works. So now let's find one of your customers and one of my customers and actually pilot it for real outside of the Interop Showcase. So I think there's a lot of benefit there for both participants and attendees to see that these standards really are real and what are the use cases that these can solve, to then put that into, how does this work for me as an attendee, as a vendor, or as a user of a vendor, to continue to drive more participation across these standards.
Oh, thank you, Alan. Anyone else have any comments on that?
Phil, I've always been impressed with the materials that are available on the showcase floor. There's a nice amount of information that's summarized and gives you the kind of the cliff notes and the brief synopsis for people who are just getting started, to at least make them aware that there's a standard and what it's called, and where you might go to find out more about it. Is it developed at IHE? Is it developed at HL7? It's a great way to put your toe in the water and just get started and learn the right amount with demonstrations on why it's valuable, and then kind of whet your appetite to dig in deeper and find out where do you go, either on the internet or groups that you begin to participate in, to be able to learn more and get more information.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. We do make sure it's a complete package. As you mentioned, the vendors put together that information package so that attendees can find out additional information and learn a little bit more and dig into it. I think one of the things that's made the brand itself as the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase so popular is everyone knows this is where real-time exchanges are happening. They know that when they come to a demonstration, the vendors aren't just showing a PowerPoint or a video or something pre-recorded. It's really happening in front of them. The exchanges are happening right then and there during the demonstrations, which means sometimes there's hiccups. They see it's real. They see how they get through those hiccups. I think it just has really been popular for people to know that's actually happening during our demos. Which actually is interesting. I'd like to ask Alan, at the showcase, what do you think it is that surprises you the most as a vendor about being there?
I mean, I think there's several things. I think one of the things, I think it might have been Mike that mentioned before about, competitors working together and things. You see, these vendors that, I won't mention any specific names, but that you think of as these major competitors, and you come to one of these vignettes and you see both of those logos listed next to each other, and here they are working together. I mean, there are people from some of these other vendors that I have worked with for years that are, competitor organizations. But we work together to do testing at Connectathon, and then at the showcase, and other types of demonstrations, at ONC meetings and things like that. And so, we go out to dinner together at HIMSS because you kind of, even though our vendors may be competitors, we both have a shared goal of improving patient care, and this is the scenario, this is the standard that's going to do it. And so, while we may fight over similar customers, we both ultimately want whichever customers we do have to be successful. And to be successful in interoperability means that we have to work together to be able to make it so that exchange can happen across all of these vendors, even when those vendors are competing.
I would totally agree. Yeah, Alan, you're spot on with that. And one of the things that I couldn't imagine before the showcase was that vendors could do this. And it's interesting the way it's evolved into the culture of some of these events, as you've pointed out. People are collaborating as colleagues in this area of interoperability. The one thing I wanted to add about that is that I think vendors have grown to recognize this, both the testing events and the demonstration events, as being a safe environment for them. They're basically allowed to and encouraged to expose their shortcomings and fix them right then and there in the testing side, and then being able to show what they've been able to do on the demonstration side. It's safe. It's not the usual competitive marketplace that they would be in, but because the topic is interoperability, that is by definition something that they have to play in the same sandbox. So it's been an interesting cultural evolution. I could never have imagined this 20 years ago.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Michael. I remember you pointed out when I was a student, was probably when I was first there. I think in my dissertation, I referred to the showcase environment almost as a shopping mall experience or analogy where you have all these competitors coming together because of the common good. They know by being together, they are going to do better by sharing and exchanging data. Brett, let me ask you a question. How can the industry use the showcase as a catalyst to further global interoperability efforts?
Sure. So, I think in addition to, getting the word out about work that's being done or standards development activities that are happening, it's really, I think, an opportunity to find advocates and others that are interested and kind of just build momentum around a particular standard or use case, and particularly also kind of align similar efforts. I know that a lot of the real work at a conference happens kind of after hours where you connect at happy hours and whatnot. But I think, meeting those people and finding out what some of those similar efforts are, whether it's, across the country or across the world, it's a really great place for that to happen. Kind of a concrete example I'm thinking of too is with the 360X, which I know we've mentioned a number of times. I really think because of the work that this group has done and being able to demonstrate some of those use cases, we do have through ONC a new funding opportunity that was announced just, I think, last week. It's the Leading Edge Acceleration Projects in Health IT, LEAP and Health IT. And one of the emphasis areas that we are funding for this fiscal year is around referral management and addressing social determinants of health. And I truly think that, if not for the success and a lot of the work that's gone into demonstrating at the Interoperability Showcase, we wouldn't be seeing that kind of further. 360X is not explicitly required to be used as one of the standards in that funding opportunity, but it's certainly listed there, and the work that this group has done has gotten us to that point.
Thanks for commenting on that. Anyone else have any comments about the global impact?
I think
Well,
with
go ahead,
COVID,
Lisa.
oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, you first.
You're doing such a good job of
No,
raising your hand.
I want to hear from you.
I just was thinking the applicability, with COVID being a global pandemic and something that we need to understand health information and share health information across national boundaries. It's just, I think it's a perfect use case for the importance of having standards that can make it possible for us to communicate and aggregate information in so that we can learn and understand and respond better to a health crisis like this.
So let me add to that a couple of things. First of all, being the only non-American on this panel, I think, let me represent the rest of the world. I think globalization of digital health is a key piece. Digital health is global. Our standards are global. Our vendors sell globally. The problems in Europe and the problems in Japan are the same as the problems we have here in North America, and certainly Canada and the US can work together all the time. Think about use cases like in the European Union, where you have a number of countries that are governed together and are and must address interoperability across national borders in different languages, in different health systems. So interoperability is very much global in nature. And with the global conference now, with the conference being a global conference, you're seeing a lot more attendees coming to the Interoperability Showcase at the HIMSS Global Conference that represent a very wide variety of countries around the world that are all coming with the same problem. So I think that those of us that have been working in the field recognize that this is very much a global effort. I'd like to again shout out to ONC and other governments for coming together in collaborative organizations like the Global Digital Health Partnership, which is made up of some 31 countries that are trying to share and learn from their respective experiences in digital health. And one of the topics of the GDHP is interoperability. I think that's a fantastic opportunity to reinforce the globalization of this. And the other one is the Global Consortium for eHealth Interoperability, which is a new organization. It's international in scope. It's the founding members are HIMSS, IHE, and HL7. But there's other organizations, governments, vendors, and other groups that are coming together with this organization to really start to focus their attention on the globalization of digital health. So the showcase is a key component of that. Everybody's looking at the showcase. It's still the only opportunity to demonstrate that kind of global interoperability. And I think it has a lot of opportunity for continued growth in the years to come.
And sorry, Phil, I guess I missed the global aspect of your question. Mike really kind of covered the GDHP a little bit, but I know that ONC is also particularly investing in the HL7 International Patient Summary as part of that work, and looking to support that as best as we can too.
Great. Thank you for adding that. Lisa, let me ask you, where do you think we have seen the most progress in healthcare IT?
That's a great question, Phil. I thought about it a little bit, how I wanted to tackle that one. And I settled on speaking about maturation in general. I think that health IT has matured a lot, and that's the biggest thing that I see in terms of progress. The ability to, I'll comment about a few specific things that I think are evidence of this kind of maturity. Number one, the fact that the importance of narrative has begun to rebalance itself after a unbalanced fixation on structured data in the early days when meaningful use first came out. The fact that the pendulum has started to swing back the other way, and humans have realized that the narrative information is as powerful and important for setting the context and understanding the discrete data. And I think that appreciation and rebalancing is a sign of maturity. We've done so much to learn how to handle and manage value sets from the days of V2, when you think you've got a standard, but then you can't even really get into the base of, well, what fields of data belong in here and what concepts am I putting in? It really fell apart at the low level of the value set bindings. And we've matured so much to be able to know what they are, find them, maintain them, advance them, version them over time. Managing value sets is a very powerful, matured capability that we've got. We're doing better with understanding how to describe our recipes, build implementation guides, establish machine readable profiles, what used to be called templates in CDA. These patterns and recipes that we have to conform to are now all machine processable. Very important for validation and knowing if we've got it right. And then larger efforts that's bringing more people together, like the ONC's adoption of the US CDI, US Core Data for Interoperability. There's a real maturity around the nation being able to set a focal point and raise the bar on basic data elements that we should all be able to exchange in a common way, and a process to continuously improve and expand what that data pool is over time. These are all tremendous signs of maturity within the health IT space. I think that it's gotten to the point where we are even beginning to expand outside of our focus just on technical standards. I know I've participated in a few panels and conversations where we're beginning to look beyond the edge of the technology to say, workflow, people processes, our governance around how we govern data. It's not just a focus on technical anymore. This is a big sign of maturity to be able to think more expansively about what interoperability really needs. And beyond that, I think harnessing the energy of communities and adopting communities to help accelerate change. In the olden days, groups at IHE and HL7 that built standards, it's like a handful of people. But the knowledge and the ability to manage hundreds of people, like at the Gravity Project and the Da Vinci, these accelerator communities are now bringing 900, 1,000 participants to the table in the creative process. And that's a huge improvement over where we were in the early days. And finally, some of the stuff that we talked about at the HL7 working group and comments that Mike made earlier about cross-community collaboration. I think that's kind of the pinnacle of all of this, is that not only have we been able to start getting ourselves organized in bigger groups, but the bigger groups are getting organized with the other bigger groups. And I think that I'm very hopeful that this is the kind of orchestration and collaboration that we need to really bend the needle in a way that we haven't seen for a really long time. But when we can start to get our powerful communities going in the same direction and working off from, singing off from the same sheet of music, I think we're really going to see some tremendous impact and positive gains in the health IT space.
Well, that was a great take on the question. Any other comments from the group?
You're here.
Excellent.
I got an amen. Yay.
Thank you so much. Michael, let me ask this question. Where do you think the showcase has the biggest opportunity to improve?
Yeah, you gave me the hardest question, Phil.
I did.
I'll get you back for that one.
I'm sure you will.
So how do you improve on something that has been so successful and still remains one of the only such venues to demonstrate interoperability on the scale of the showcase? It's always a challenge to freshen it, and it's always the organizers and the leaders and the staff like you and Mari and others, the team that really gets together on this, refresh it every year to be better and better. What's the ultimate objective? Well, again, we want to get vendors to show their stuff, and we want to get attendees to see the stuff that's relevant for them. So how do we improve on that? Well, I guess we can always deploy different technologies to better engage the thousands of visitors each day that come to the showcase to somehow interact with the hundreds of demonstrating companies and systems. I guess that's generally the objective that would always be guiding us for improvement. Again, though, we have tried lots and lots of different things. We have had guided tours with docents, and Lisa's been one, and I've been one, to lead groups through. We've had self-directed tours. We've had random and user-selected assignment to vignettes, because what we want to do is get users programmed into things that are meaningful for them. We've tried theater-style intros, like what I was the Barker for, which gave a background. And we've also tried just doing this with signage. Every year it's refreshed and refreshed and refreshed, and it's overwhelming, and always much more than an individual can usually assimilate. You could spend the entire HIMSS conference in the Interoperability Showcase and learn something every single day, something more. So I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to just say that the staff is completely focused and work super hard at finding ways to improve this user experience, and they will continue to do so. As far as I'm concerned, there's no magic bullet. Just keep it refreshed and continue to do what you've been so successfully doing. And I shout out to you, Phil, and the team you work with now. It's extremely professional the way it's organized, and again, you get the results every year. More and more people. And it's the place to be at the HIMSS conference. So, and it will continue to be. So I don't have a lot of solutions here. All I have to say is better and better and better, and you're doing it.
I'll raise my
thank you.
hand.
Go ahead, Lisa, please.
So I have two possibilities. One is to connect with people, with real health outcomes, to try and make sure that, like, you could spot an outcome and find it and put a dot on it or a sticker on it, or have almost like a scavenger hunt for spotting outcomes, so that the focus of the vignettes and the stories and what we do, the challenge would be to make it more outcome focused, that the end isn't just sort of that the data got from point A to point Z, but that we actually affected change that ended up in an improved health outcome. And that needs to make it real to the patients, to the people who are actually undergoing and have these health conditions that need to have their care better coordinated and their lives improved by this healthcare technology. So I think getting outcome focused would be one thing. And the other challenge is, what if there's a way to kind of like bring it out of the showcase and into the field? Take some cameras and a couple of your staff or people who are involved, and instead of bringing the technology into the showcase, take the showcase out to where healthcare is really being performed. And let's see, where do you see it at the hospital? Where do you see it at the federally qualified health center or the behavioral health clinic, where people are really getting their care? Is it real in the field? I know the ONC is looking at doing some stuff this year to advance and mature their testing around real world testing. Maybe there's an opportunity to bring some of that real worldness to it, by teaming up with what the ONC is doing and driving around real world testing, and figure out how we can find interoperability going on in the real world.
Thanks, Lisa. I want to ask Alan his take on this as a vendor in the showcase about the improvement.
I think, just other ways to participate. I think, I mentioned that we've done a couple of years now, the marketplace kiosk. I think that was a good addition, making it so that vendors can, have a single place where they show off, multiple things that a single vendor does. And there's a different, take there of what you're showing when it's in a defined vignette and I'm showing a single piece of what I do, but I'm showing it with a bunch of other vendors, versus having a kiosk where I just show, here's a bunch of things that I do, but you don't get to see it with the other vendors. So there's benefit to both of those. I don't know if there's ways that that can be improved upon. I don't know, maybe as a kiosk participant, I could try to coordinate something with the other kiosks around me, right? I'll show you a bunch of cool functionality that No2 does, and then you can walk to the kiosk next door and see what some of that looks like, because I just sent them a message. So I don't know if there's, some coordination like that is possible, where it's not necessarily a defined vignette, but there's functionality that can still be shown and improved upon. I love Lisa's idea of, moving some of this to the real world. There's only so much you can do with, a test patient, a test scenario. And while I think we do a great job, like, again, I'll say 360X, because like we keep bringing that one up. We've got Dr. Holly Miller and Dr. Terry O'Malley and some other great clinical folks who are part of that and create this, pretty in-depth clinical scenario with patient background and stuff. But being able to see it in the real world is a different experience than anything you can create with a test patient. And so looking at some of those types of opportunities, I know we did several years ago when I guess it was Dr. Washington was at ONC. We did have several vendors who participated in a joint demonstration where he actually, with some other folks from ONC, went from a hospital to a skilled nursing facility to another organization and showed kind of how it looked. It wasn't a single patient going across all of them, because it was actual clinical users showing, here's what this looks like in my system. Okay, now let's go see what this same functionality looks like in another system. And it was really cool to be able to participate and show some of that real world type scenario.
Phil,
Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know if you're watching the chat, but John Murky's raised a really good comment, and John's always got good ideas, and I'd like to just recognize his memory that back in probably 10 years ago, we tried the idea, or considered the idea, of registering every HIMSS attendee into a EMPI or client registry so that they could personally take part in the demonstrations against that particular ID. And perhaps there's an opportunity to get back to that as we've matured, as Lisa has mentioned, over the years. Maybe we can do that and add to that, not just the ability to personalize this to yourself. You can go on a personal journey and have your record available to you on your device and see how this is all working, but you can also do this around the entire exhibit. with other, at other stations with other vendors that are participating in this. And now, of course, with the, with all the discoveries we've made in a virtual world, we could even do this with people that are not actually physically present at the conference itself, and make this all very personal and expand this demonstration of interoperability, using some of these types of functions. So that might be something to put in your wish list for future showcases, because I always thought that was a great idea, and it would be great if we could get back to that in some way.
No, I appreciate those. Before we jump into the chat, I wanted to ask Brett, did you want to comment a little bit on the testing that Lisa had mentioned in the field? I'm not sure if that's your area.
It's not a huge area of me necessarily, and I'm not sure exactly which aspect you're referring to on that. I do see something in the chat that maybe I'll jump into from Amit around kind of what can be done after the showcase. That that's something that was stirring around in my mind too. Kind of making sure that the showcase isn't an opportunity to show something off and then it kind of just sits on the shelf until next year. So maybe there's an opportunity for IHE to kind of follow up on some of the showcase participants in the past and kind of do kind of a where are they now, and highlighting standards and use cases that are happening in the real world, and kind of following up on those, or in cases where maybe more work is needed, kind of pumping more energy back into those and kind of bringing them back up to the surface, I think might be something interesting as well.
Thanks. Any more comments on Amit's question?
Well, I think Amit is pointing something out that's vitally important in this part of the cycle, the entire cycle. What we want is for people to come and see at the showcase what exists out there and how the vendors support interoperability, and then they can go back to their organizations and buy it and implement it. And that's what we really want. So we need to be able to, it's the last mile. And we want to find ways to make this, it's carrots and sticks, right? So we want to incent the vendors to, in fact, go to that last mile. And I think Brett raised an interesting point. Oftentimes what's demonstrated never leaves the test environment, the demonstration environment. And what we want to do is make it real. And so we've got IHE has programs like conformity assessment to try and help facilitate that. That expects vendors to test a particular product, a particular version of that product, and get a seal that basically says, you have this and it's in a product. And that's in fact what we're trying to get to.
Alan, any comments on it?
I mean, I agree with what others have said. I think the one other thing that I saw in chat that I would add, Herman made a comment about, I believe, making it simpler, try not to cram too many participants in a single use case. And I think that varies scenario by scenario and year to year. One of the great things, again, being participant in 360X, we've been able to have that be a sponsored use case. And we have enough participants who are regularly working to develop the 360X standards that we essentially fully control that vignette. We decide which vendors are participating and kind of rotate through and make the scenario. There are others that I have certainly participated in the past where vendors kind of just get thrown in of we need to have a certain number of vendors in the vignette, so we're going to add some additional ones and then try to figure out how to make it work. And so I think there's a balance there of, obviously there's only so much space in the Interop Showcase, and there are so many vendors who want to participate, so where can you get everyone to fit? But at the same time, does it make sense to the attendees? Because some of these scenarios, to Herman's point about making it simpler, when you have a demonstration that's 30 minutes long, how many of the attendees actually stay and watch the whole thing versus kind of watch the beginning and then move on to another vignette? So how can we get everyone who wants to participate able to participate, but make it engaging to the attendees who want to see it, not just something for the vendors who are participating to continue to show this thing when the attendees are walking away because it's too long.
No, and I appreciate that feedback for sure. I know each year we take a look at our core function of the showcase and think, what additional aspects can we add, like an API bar one year or a spotlight feeder that's coming up in HIMSS 21. We've also discussed the idea of having sort of mini showcase demos sort of in pods where you only have 2 or 3 vendors telling a story together. And so certainly we can see how that can definitely offer a value to our attendees. So Lisa, let me ask this question.
I sorry, wait, just
Yeah.
before,
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
just one thing, and then I'll take another question. But one of the things that came up, where the Connectathon is going on right now, and we're dealing with all this new technology. And for a monitor, it's really awesome because I can see everybody's screens so well. Where when you're live, you're always looking over somebody's shoulder, and you're, trying to. I have glasses. I'm like squinting, get my bifocals working the right way. It's hard to see. But when I have the, an environment where I'm able to actually see somebody else's computer screen so clearly, it's really better for me. And we were talking about, wow, even if we get back together live for Connectathon next year, it might be good to use the technology and be live so that we could see each other's screens better. And one of the things that we always are challenged with the vignettes and the scenarios is that the 20 people or so are huddled out at the edge of that booth, and they can't see what's going on the screen very well. We're describing it, but nobody can really appreciate it fully because they can't see the screens. And so maybe there'd be some way that you could think about how to use this kind of virtual technology mixed in with a live venue to make it possible for each and every participant to be able to see what's going on the screen better.
Let me add to that, Lisa, also hearing. If you could build in some audio technology where people could use their own device to both see and hear, it'd be more like when you go to a museum and you have a self-guided tour. You have that foundation, and you don't wander away because you can't hear. So that,
Yeah.
That's what I mean. There are lots of new technologies in that area that we could deploy.
Certainly, those are definitely great suggestions, and I'm sure myself and our team are writing these down right now. But it does look like we're getting towards the end of the session. So I just want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists for spending their time the last hour discussing all the values that they've found during the HIMSS Interoperability Showcase, and of course, invite others to find out more. We'll have additional webinars about the showcase in HIMSS 21 coming up. And certainly you can look into our chat and try to get some more information. Reach out to us at the Showcase team. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great day.